At the University of California's campus at Berkeley, which everybody calls Cal, outside the administration building there's a big empty plaza space. And at the top of a sort of a short run of stairs from the administration area down to that plaza, there was a plaque that's embedded in the steps. And it names those steps the Mario Savio steps. This is Mario Savio. You're about to hear Mario Savio in a moment, and I'll just tell you for context, the President Kerr that you hear him mention, President Kerr was president of the University of California at the time that Mario Savio was speaking here. The context here is that the students were trying to overturn a ban on political activity on campus. They wanted free speech rights to advocate for political causes on campus, and they're protesting here against the university president and the university's board of regents. Check this out.
We were told the following. If President Kerr actually tried to get something more liberal out of the regents in his telephone conversations, why didn't he make some public statement to that effect? And the answer we received from a well-meaning liberal was the following. He said, would you ever imagine the manager of a firm making a statement publicly in opposition to his board of directors? That's the answer. Well, I ask you to consider. If this is a firm, and if the Board of Regents are the Board of Directors, and if President Kerr, in fact, is the manager, then I tell you something, the faculty are a bunch of employees, and we're the raw materials. But we're a bunch of raw materials that don't mean to have any process upon us, don't mean to be made into any product, don't mean to end up being bought by some clients of the university, be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone. We're human beings.
Or human beings. It was Mario Savio. His big speech that day at Cal in 1964 culminated with this famous rallying cry to the students who had assembled there.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
That was December 1964. And from that very famous speech, there's a little bit of video from that speech, which you've just seen there. There are some still images, and there is some audio of Mario Savio's entire speech. The record of this event, in terms of the media available to us now, it's sort of patchworky.
That doesn't mean that you have to break anything. 1,000 people sitting down someplace, not letting anybody buy, not letting anything happen, can stop any machine, including this machine, and it will stop.
Mario Savio. Part of him there talking about putting your body on the gears of the machine. You have heard that before, right? That became one of the iconic rhetorical moments of the whole decade of the 1960s. And there weren't very many of those moments from 1964 on the West Coast. But it was like he was talking about how to stop the Vietnam War. It was like he was talking about how to stop segregation. It was like he was talking about big national issues. And allegorically, maybe he was talking about those bigger issues. But in the moment, what he was talking about, as you heard there, was free speech, was students' rights to be protesting at the University of California. This was a huge confrontation between the students and the university, between the students and the police. And it was over a very local campus free speech issue. And even though the free speech movement faced huge hostility at the time, there were more than 800 arrests, the largest number of arrests of students in U.S. history up until that point. 30 years later, the school put up a plaque for Mario Savio. They named the steps where he spoke there to honor the most articulate and powerful of the free speech movement student organizers at that spot. And at that spot, this month, at that plaza where Cal put up the plaque to mark the success of the free speech movement, here's what happened on Wednesday.
Here they come.
Riot police breaking up an Occupy Wall Street demonstration at Cal's supposed free speech plaza last week on Wednesday. Here's the thing, though. Since that massive police show of force on November 9th, the protesters there are back. Today, they organized a day of action at Cal that included classes being taught outside and a march from Cal's Sproul Plaza, the home of Mario Savio Steps, to the local public high school, Berkley High, and to Berkeley City College. Cal's annual Mario Savio Memorial Lecture was already scheduled to be taking place tonight. It was scheduled to be held this year in some ballroom on campus, but thanks to a request from the Occupy Cal protesters, the Mario Savio Lecture tonight will be held outdoors. It will be held outdoors where that plaque is at Sproul Plaza, where those cops beat up those protesting students just last week. At this hour, the student protesters are reportedly planning to erect tents on the grass near where the lecture is to be given. Because of that, they say they expect a confrontation with police. They expect to be removed from the Free Speech Memorial Plaza again, maybe in the middle of the Mario Savio Free Speech Memorial Lecture. Mario Savio's widow put out a statement yesterday saying that the lecture was going to be moved outside, quote, in protest against the use of excessive police force against nonviolent demonstrators. She said, "We apologize for your inconvenience, but, as Mario said, there comes a time." Today in New York City, very, very early this morning, really in the middle of the night, New York City police raided and tore down and cleared out the Occupy Wall Street encampment that has been at Zuccotti Park in Lower Manhattan for nearly 2 months. The raid happened at 1 a.m. roughly, as most of the protesters there were asleep. New York City police officers dressed in riot gear handed out a written notice to the protesters telling them where their personal articles from the encampment could be retrieved. Which sounds lovely until you saw what they were doing to the protesters' personal belongings. There were reports that police used knives to cut up the sturdy military-grade tents that were the best hope of surviving winter down there. You can see police here cutting down the protesters' tent poles with handheld saws, with sawzalls. This was a massive police action. There were 200 arrests early this morning. Zuccotti Park was totally cleared. But here's the thing. Like at Cal, like everywhere so far for the past couple of months, the protesters are already back. After taking temporary refuge last night in nearby Foley Square, in the immediate aftermath of the police raid, at daybreak, people came back to Zuccotti Park and said that no matter what happened, whatever specific spot they were going to be boxed out of for the time being, they were not going away. They were not leaving.
I mean, on a practical level, what happens now? What's day one? What's day two?
I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to put my tent right back up. We show them that we are not just words on an internet screen. We are people, and we are willing to put ourselves in pain and misery to put our point across.
How important is the occupation to Occupy Wall Street?
I think it's very important. This is the location, this is the scene of the crime, and we need a critical mass of people. When people get together and they talk face to face, and they have a library, and people are coming down to talk and organize, and it's what's needed. You can't do everything on the internet.
Those interviews are both shot by our producer Laura Conaway, who was down there this morning talking with protesters, and also just talking with the passersby.
If they can't be here, what do you think happens to their movement?
Oh, I don't know. I think wouldn't you guess it's strong enough that it's gained so much momentum that they'll keep it going somehow?
It does seem like they are strong enough, at least so far, to keep it going somehow. That same point about the fact that this is not going away was made eloquently and pretty effectively, I think, by Dan Siegel on this program last night. Dan Siegel is the advisor to Oakland Mayor Jean Quan, who resigned in protest over that city once again clearing out their Occupy encampment. Dan Siegel was our guest on the interview last night.
To me, it seems like a totally useless and futile activity to spend millions of dollars to take people out of tents, to create situations where there was bloodshed in our streets and lots of chaos for days, because they're going to come back. This is a movement that can't be stopped.
They're going to come back. Although he did not put it in these specific terms, Dan Siegel was essentially recommending last night that cities consider taking the approach that Washington, D.C. has taken as a city thus far, which is to not try to clear the encampments out of there, to do what you need to do to protect public safety, but to also recognize that this movement is important, to try to figure out a way to let them stay. Practically speaking, though, and this is just practical advice to every mayor in the country, to every police force in the country, The whole point of this protest is that it doesn't go away. That's the tactical point. It's not called March on Wall Street. It's not called Rally at Wall Street. It's called Occupy Wall Street. It's not a stand up for the 99% on Saturday at noon movement. It's a we are the 99% movement. And its tactics are about physical presence, about continued physical presence. And so beating the heck out of people and knocking down their signs and arresting them and tearing down their stuff and cutting it up with sawzalls and running them out of a public space for a day, that makes this movement stronger. And it's always been this way. You kind of should have figured it out by now. I mean, the reason Mario Savio gave his bodies on the gears speech that became so iconic, the reason he gave that speech in December 1964 is because in October 1964, police moved in to try to arrest people for handing out civil rights pamphlets on the Berkeley campus. And those arrests led to this. Look, you see what's in the center of that? It's not a stage. A kid who the police were trying to arrest for handing out civil rights pamphlets is in that police car, which is what's in the middle there. The police car is what Mario Savio is standing on. That's hundreds, no thousands of other people surrounding the police car, not letting the police take that kid away to be arrested. That kid was in that car for nearly 2 days. Had he not been arrested, he would have just been a kid on Sproul Plaza giving out civil rights pamphlets. But because you arrested him, those became, 30 years later, the Mario Savio steps. That plaza became home to Berkeley's free speech monument. It became not just some one kid's free speech effort. It became the free speech movement, which, by the way, became a major part of why we got a massive nationwide anti-war movement in this country. And so in Oakland on October 25th, 2011, they beat the heck out of people. They fractured the skull of an Iraq War veteran. They doused all of downtown Oakland in tear gas. They set off concussion grenades. And they cleared that plaza that day, and that encampment came back at that plaza bigger than ever. Now they've cleared it again, as of 2 nights ago. How did Occupy Oakland respond? They came back. They came back to the original square they occupied there and also to a nearby one where they plan to stick it out for even longer. In New York City, they cleared out Zuccotti Park in the early hours of this morning with no warning while people slept. Tonight, Occupy Wall Street is back to Zuccotti Park. In Boston, remember the footage we showed you a few weeks ago, the Occupy Boston encampment being cleared out? They're back. They are back, too. And they're filing legal action today, the ACLU and the National Lawyers Guild, trying to secure them a place to stay for the long run. In Portland, Oregon this weekend, there was a huge show of force against the Occupy Portland encampment. Occupy Portland has responded by calling for a citywide day of action on Sunday. They're claiming more support than they have ever had in the past. At Cal Berkeley, after being beaten by police and cleared out of their protest site, Occupy Cal was back with a full day of protest activities today. And they are back tonight at the birthplace of Berkeley's free speech movement to hear, outdoors tonight, the Mario Savio Memorial Lecture.